All right. Okay, it's Monday, and if it's Monday between 1:30 to 2:30, well, we're doing Purpose Centered Leadership Live. So I am going to give, as usual, a minute or two for folks to get on. When you get on, please just put your name in the comments and where you are, watching from, right? What city, what state, what country. So I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to do that. Today we're talking about the Great Resignation. And if my assistant is watching, which I think they are, if you could put in the chat the post link for the article that I read that inspired this live. So today we're talking about the Great Resignation, the reason why employees are leaving companies and what can leaders do about it. So it's called the Great Resignation. Hi, Brandy. Hi, Seshadri. I hope I'm saying that right. Brandy from Baton Rouge. Ruth from South Africa. Seshadi from Boston. Tiffany from Texas. Rachel. Olga, Netter, Fabienne, Samantha, Jackie. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Just so warms my heart to see you guys here. We're talking today about the Great Resignation, right? Why are employees leaving companies en masse? And what can leaders do about it? What can employers do about it, if anything, right? I'm not sure if they can, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And I was inspired by an article, a newsletter that was written by Robert Glazer. I think he has over 300,000 subscribers on LinkedIn. And it's called The Great Resignation is Upon Us, and he's talking about here's why changing jobs isn't always the best. So he's giving one perspective, right? From the employee's perspective, why changing jobs isn't always the best answer. But I want to take it from a different perspective as I'm a leadership coach. So I want to take it from a different perspective, from leader's perspective. So welcome, Sabrina. Hey, Sabrina, good to see you. My Facebook friends. Awesome. Travis, Donna, Christina. Love to have you guys here. Thank you so much. So it's called The Great Resignation. And I want to read something to you guys. As you're coming on, please continue to put your name and your state in the chat and your country. I promise you, I will go back and say hello to you when I'm done. But so in this article, right, this is what I found to be very interesting. And I want you guys to really give me your comments today. It says in April of this year, nearly 4 million employees quit their jobs in the US. If that pace continues, 25% of the entire American workforce could be changing jobs this year, in an all-time record. Okay, and the author of this article said, and I agree with him on this point, it feels as though half my LinkedIn feed today is companies posting hiring announcements or professionals announcing new jobs. So the title of today's live is called The Great Resignation, right? Why are employees leaving their jobs and what can employers do about it? So I have a couple of theories, right? But before I get into my theories, I want to remind you guys about a community that is starting the first week in August. I forgot the date. It's Tuesday. The first Tuesday in August. It's called Communally, right? And Communally is going to be a community of leaders, founders, and entrepreneurs for folks who want to grow their leadership, right? It's going to be trainings like these, but a little bit more targeted. It'll be myself with some other professors and some leadership thought leaders. And it will be a great way for you guys to network in a smaller group of like-minded people. So there is a link to Community that's going to be posted in the chat, but it's also in our About section. So I'm going to ask my assistant to post a link to the chat. It would be awesome to see you there. It would be a private group and it's leadership development. And I did this community for those folks who they weren't yet able to make the investment of working with me one-on-one or with their team one-on-one, but I wanted to still give back. So I started this very low investment community where we'll work in a group, in a cohort of sorts. and we will be doing leadership development. So I wanted to get that out there. But let me continue on with my take on why. And I'm not going to go into full details, but what can employers do about the massive departure of employees from their company? Well, let us first talk about why people are leaving, right? And there are very many different reasons. Um, One reason the author stated here was that the pandemic pretty much opened people's eyes as to the brevity of life, right? As to you can be here one day and you're literally gone tomorrow. We've seen so many deaths in here in the US and across the world. So people are no longer willing to compromise being in a bad job with a bad boss, with employees or peers that they do not enjoy. They'd rather not be there. So they're out of here, right? Also, too, there were people who wanted to change jobs before the pandemic, but because of the pandemic, they stayed in jobs where they were unhappy. So now that they're out of the pandemic, sort of, they're making a move. So now they have a different sense of like their mortality and like, look, I want to do something that is satisfactory to me. Another reason the author gave was that some people are feeling burned out after 18 months of pandemic. And again, they just want to do something that's more aligned with their purpose. And so, and some people wanted to start a company a long time ago, right? They wanted to be an entrepreneur. So now between the layoff monies and the stimulus checks and all of that, they decided they're going to take a chance because you know what? There were so many people who got laid off that sometimes when we think that our job is secure, right? I think it was proven last year that nothing was secured. So people are betting on themselves. So that's some of the reasons from the employee's perspective, right? So here's what's happening, right, in the recruiting world. And this, I'm still talking about it from the employee's perspective, but then I'm going to give a couple tips from the employer's perspective as to what they can do to perhaps stem the tide of this departure. And again, like you guys feel free to comment, and I will put your comment on the screen. But let me continue. So another reason from the employee's perspective is stress. Stress. People actually, from what this article said, people want to actually work less hours for more pay. And because it is, I mentioned last week that it was an employees market, yeah, employees are getting more money with the flexibility of staying at home. And it's just creating such a demand in the marketplace. So if you are an employer who has not pivoted to the hybrid or the remote work, you're just really in a bad shape. Now, what's been happening though is that there's such a demand for these employees that recruiters and employers are not telling the truth about, in the recruiting process. So they're painting a rosy picture, according to this article, of what you're going to get, the benefits of what you're going to get, because they're so desperate and all this high salary promise. But then when you actually get there to that new job, it's not what was promised. So there's a lot of that going on in the industry as well, in the workplace as well. So what can employers do who are losing employees? Again, what did this article say? In April alone, how many millions? Let's see. 4 million people quit their jobs, right? So, all right. So from the employer's perspective, as I read this article, I thought, wow, what can an employer do? Because I've also been getting calls myself for some of these very folks who are leaving their corporate jobs to try to start their own companies. And I'm asking them reasons why, what's going on. And some of these reasons that this article stated is true. Burnout, life is short. Let me try something else. Let me get into my own purpose. But as I was thinking about this dilemma from the employer's perspective, a thought that came to me was this. So employees have woken up, right? And they want to have more autonomy. They want to have more creativity, more control over their lives. And for those of you who guys who've been following me for a while, you've seen some of my videos. I talk a lot about the top 10 mistakes leaders make. And, one of those mistakes is a top down leadership, right? A top down authoritarian leadership. And I mentioned a few months ago that leadership style it's just out the door. It's not effective anymore. And even more so. So I'm going to give you one tip if you're an employer, a leader, something to consider to keep your good employees is creating a space for what I call intrapreneurism. I gave a talk to an HR group last year or the year before, I think, on intrapreneur versus entrepreneur. And an intrapreneur, intrapreneur, is an employee who works for a company, but they have an entrepreneur's mindset. So that company's culture will have to be one that allows creativity, right? That allows employees to come up with their ideas and try out their ideas within their organization, within that employer's organization. I think if employers become more open-minded about having an entrepreneurial mindset, they'll be able to hold on to some of their key employees. And I want to know what you guys think. Sabrina says, for me, the pandemic showed me personally that I am more invested in my employer than my employer is invested in me. Well, that's unfortunately what happened, Sabrina. You and a lot of people felt that way because when the rubber met the road during the pandemic, a lot of employers did not rise to the challenge, right? And as this article pointed out, it was the employers who pushed through the adversity. Those are the ones that kept going, and those are the ones that are having the most retention. I featured an employer about 2 months ago, the Capitol Grill, which is a restaurant chain across this country. And I featured about how I had gone to the Capitol Grill a couple of months ago, and I was speaking to some of the employees there, and how they mentioned that during the pandemic, the tremendous care that their employer took of them, right? That the employer really invested in their well-being mentally and physically, by providing them these food baskets and just care packets on a monthly basis. Really looked out for their employees. And it just made a big difference post-pandemic when they had to go back to work. They retained the majority of their employees because that employer, the Capitol Grill chain, had really done an amazing job in making their employees feel like, look, man, you're family. So yes, Sabrina is right. I'd love to hear some more thoughts, but yes, I think employers are going to have to begin to shift their mindset to one that allows for entrepreneurism, right? And there's a way to do that, right? But it's going to require from the top, from the CEO level, and then on the management level, a culture shift, a culture change. In other words, the way how they do business now, where is we tell you what to do, you do this thing and you get rewarded. It's going to be more like, okay, we have a general mission, and here's our mission. Our mission is to X, Y, Z, do good in the world, right? How we execute this mission is now going to be in a participatory style, right? Where we are inviting you, talented employees, to be a bigger part of this conversation. Because at the end of the day, folks, people want to feel valued, right? They want to feel like their opinions matter. They want you to show them that their opinions matter. And then they want to be rewarded for that opinion, right? For what they're sharing. Let me put here, I think Patrice said, I was made redundant as a result of the pandemic from my position as VP of HR after 23 years with the company. I'm now an entrepreneur, so I'm grateful that I was pushed into my potential. And Patrice, that's really why we're having this great resignation, because people became so disillusioned about what was stability, what that looked like. And, people decide to wake up and say, you know what? I'm going to go on my own. I'm going to try on my own. because there's no stable anymore. I might as well bet on myself. So Patrice, I hope you will join us in communally, because as you start your own company, you're going to need some leadership training. So you don't become like an employer that you just left. So I think there's a link in the feed here called Leadership Communities for my group called Communally. And it's where I'm going to be talking and working with leaders, founders, entrepreneurs, and how to develop that mindset for the 21st century leadership. It's a different mindset than what we had before. So let's see. Clement, it says, is the entrepreneurship concept applicable to all environments, factors, etc.? Great question, Clement. It is applicable in all environment, but not at every position. So it works in every environment. For example, I am a small consulting firm, right? But when I work with people, I give them a lot of autonomy, right? To come up with concepts, right? That things I don't know much about really, but it's cutting edge, right? And that's really what it is required. It requires a system, a leadership system, a management system, a culture that is open. So in a factory, for example, you may have a leadership team or a management team, and you may also have some rising stars, right? And so you might want to have an open session, open for ideas. The people on the front line, your frontline workers, whether it's a factory or anywhere else, they have better ideas of how things should get done than the guy or the gal upstairs in the CEO suite. They have better ideas. I've seen it in my own organizations. I've run a law firm for 20 something years. I've run a charity for 16 years. I've always been very inclusive. I've always appreciated the entrepreneurial spirit. And it served me well. I have grown beyond what I would have been able to do on my own, because I was very open to those people coming in, my rising stars, and showing us a better way to do things. It's just a winning strategy as far as I'm concerned. And I'm going to be talking about more of those kinds of strategies in our group starting in August called Communally, a place for leaders. And it's to help leaders, shift their mindset, shift their culture, because employers are not winning this game currently. Employees, and hey, more power to the employees, right? Employees are leading the charge. They're finding their voice and they're going out there. But here's the thing though, employees, for those of you who are going to become your own entrepreneurs, guess what? It's a vicious cycle, right? Because you're an employee, you don't like the way how your employer works, but eventually you yourself will become an employer, right? So you also need to learn the principles of leadership and management as well. So let's see. Let's see if I have any more comments. Okay, so someone says exactly what I did. I went on my own consulting after a decade of consulting for someone else's company and dream. Time to make my dream mindset is 100%. It's true. It's a mindset thing. And again, LinkedIn user, I'm inviting you to join our community at Communally, because one of the things that entrepreneurs are gifted at is they have the pioneer spirit, right? They'll go out and make things happen. However, when it comes to management and leadership, they are not always well equipped. They're well equipped for the ideas, and and again, they're just courageous. But you're also going to need training on how to manage, even if it's a small 2-person enterprise. You need these tips and strategies. So I invite you to also join our community. So from the employer standpoint, that is the number one tip. Last week, I talked a lot about culture change. And I was explaining, for those of you who were on the call last week, I was saying how the jobs coming across my desk as people try to reach out to me to recruit me into their organization, is all about them CEOs needing help with culture, right? To change the culture of their organizations. And there's a reason why, because people are leaving to start their own companies leaving for better jobs, and just wanting a different life. They just want the balance. And so, so I I encourage those of you who are leaving, though. First of all, kudos to you, and I respect your courage and your bravery to look out for yourself. Okay, and now, for one of the things that this article that I was talking about mentioned, though, is that recruiters are not all being truthful about what they're offering because they're just desperate. The employers are desperate in these companies, and so they are promising the world. They're promising the stars, but when you get there, you get the moon or less, right? So do your homework. The grass is not always greener. Do your homework and make sure that you are vetting the organization. So this is for the employees on the call today. Make sure that you're vetting the company. For those of you who are going into the entrepreneurial world, I can appreciate that. I've been an entrepreneur for 30 something years. So I'm just an entrepreneur, right? So good for you. Get in is you are not pivoting. You're not making the shift. You're not being agile and you're stuck in an old paradigm that is not going to work for you, will not work for you, and it's only going to get worse. Unfortunately, for example, we are hearing about the Delta variant. Now, it's very discouraging. And we know we can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, because now that we're out there, people want to stay out there. But people are going to be cautiously optimistic. So employers, there might be some more pains for you down the line. So you need to be agile. You need to pivot. You need to be flexible. You need to change your culture. And you need to do better by your employees, especially the ones who've been with you a long time, who have been loyal and faithful, and especially to your rising stars. So I have a few more. I have a few more questions, a few more minutes. If there's any questions, let's see what Fabienne has to say. Fabienne says, NicoleSmolinski.com is a great resource as a life and mindset coach, helping people build a growth mindset to find great fulfillment without the overwhelm, self-doubt, and burnout. Thank you for sharing that link, Fabienne. I like this discussion. Thank you. I'm just going to say, I don't want to mess up your name. If there are any employers on the call, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you're doing in your company to maintain your employees, right? Because you're going to have to do something to maintain your employees. But if not, if you're watching this, right, and it's not 3 p.m. Eastern on Monday, you're going to be team replay. So do hashtag team replay, and I promise you I will go back and answer your questions. Okay, let me take this one long comment here. So Mazar says, most of the organizations that kneel down to their financial concept during the pandemic time, they surely lag behind in all the areas that was once their base and foundation of the organization. To say employees typically is an established fact that now that numerous headmen of companies made fun and slagging of their assets, resources, and stocked their shift towards only to mean an employees are big. Okay, I think what you're trying to say here is this in a nutshell, right? If you stuck it to your employees during the pandemic, they're sticking it back to you post-pandemic. It's sad, but that's kind of what's been happening. And Rachel says, or Raquel says, I have been lucky that I was promoted midway the pandemic, and I thank God for that. And Rachel, if you're in a company that promoted you during the pandemic, that is a company that you want to stick with, because that's a company who demonstrated loyalty and who had the right mindset to reward, to have a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset during a time when so many people were shrinking back. And look, I'm not, there were some employers who were just shoved out of business, folks. It's not their fault. They didn't have the capital. They didn't have the infrastructure, maybe. They didn't have that pool of funds. So I empathize with those employers, right? So not all employers who closed were bad. And not all employers received money. I have clients who never received stimulus funding and applied to save their people and just didn't. So not all employers are bad, but there were some of those who made it in the news that were selfishly lining their own pockets. And so what's happening now is that people are no longer loyal to them. So Clement says, what are the 2 to 3 steps to adjust the culture of an old-fashioned company to entrepreneurship concept? Clement, you must join me in communally. I'll give you a couple of steps, maybe one step here, but that's what we want to discuss in that community group with myself and other people who are leading in the leadership space. But the first step to start, Clement, and I don't know if you are an employer, Clement, you might want to tell me if you're an employer, a manager, or a leader in your organization. But if you are in those positions, right, the first step to shift the culture is to go back and look at your mission statement. Is it still valid? Look at your vision. Is it still valid post-pandemic? So you look at that. And it may need some tweaking. And if you hadn't asked for input before from your team, when the mission was being created, now is the time, leaders, and that would be my one tip. Now is the time to gather your folks around, those who are still with you, and collectively look at your mission statement and say, should we tweak this? What should it be? What does our vision for the future look like? So that's where I would start. Clement, you said you're an employer. Clement, that's where I would start. And the second thing I would do, Clement, is to join me in communally, where I'm going to give more strategies. But Clement, that's where I would start as an employer. Go back to your mission statement. Hopefully you have one, Clement. Go back to your vision statement. Look at it. Does it still hold up in today's leadership environment, in today's post-pandemic environment? And if it does not, most likely, I would say 85% of mission statements need to be tweaked, because what we are experiencing now, we have not experienced in over 100 years. So if your mission statement is under 100 years old, it's probably going to need tweaking. And at this point, you want to engage your team into creating the new mission. This will give them ownership of your mission, and together you guys can recreate the future. That is what I am talking about. Oh, and someone's asking me about the title of the book on my desk. Is it this one? It's called It's the Manager. It's a great, great book. And managers, if you're on the phone, it's talking about how managers are really the key to keeping your employees. So as people are leaving your company, it's the managers. I don't say it's the manager's fault, but it's the manager's responsibility. The Gallup find of managers and team leaders is the single biggest factor in your organization's long-term success, right? So if the managers and the team leaders aren't right in your organization, especially Clement, if your managers and team leaders aren't properly trained and developed, and that's going to be your responsibility, Clement, to get them the training and the development. If they're not properly developed, they're the key to your long-term growth strategy or the key to your demise. So that's the name of the book. It's The Manager. It's Jim Clifton and Jim Hartner, folks from Gallup. I'm also reading another one. It was an oldie that I had from a long time ago. I think this was written in the 80s sometime. So it's kind of old, but great information. 80s or maybe 90s. It's called Measures of Quality. Let's see. Measures of Quality and High Performance. I'm back in this book again because it was a great chapter on culture. And even though this book was written back in, let me see if I can find it. It was published in 1998, right? Even though it was published in 1998, the chapter on culture is extremely relevant for today. And this shows me that everything rises and falls on that whole culture, which of course is based on the employer, right? And their mindset. So I'll take one more and then I will sign off for today as we got to the 30-minute mark. I never like to go too long because then the replay, you guys won't watch it. But Raquel says, I'm researching more to establish it as my element to be outsourced by several entities. I need more mentorship in this area if I want to thrive in this area as an expert. So I think the area that you're talking about is The better news is that I took time to realize that what the HR fraternity was not giving sufficient attention, and this was an HR audit. So I think you're in the HR space. Listen, I have been in the leadership space for, I don't know, 30 years maybe. Not because you don't see the gray hairs, I color those, okay? But I'm a lady in my late 50s. And I've been in this space for a long time. And I'm still learning, still reading, okay? And I am actually honored to be co-teaching a class, at least one, presenting a leadership class at my alma mater in about a month on leadership, right? So I've been in this space for a while, and that's the reason why I started this community called Community. And the jump off date, we're going to be meeting on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. It will be recorded for those of you who miss. And I already have a LinkedIn group started for the members of that community, where during the week, I'll meet weekly with you guys live and train. I'm going to probably also offer some John Maxwell courses in there, lunch and learns, etc. But during the week, we will have a community group where people of like-mindedness will gather, exchange best practices, what's working in your industry, what's not working. Leadership is leadership. Doesn't matter where you work. If you work in a factory, or if you work in a boutique, if you work in a law firm, leadership is leadership. So that's like a passion of mine. And this is because, again, many people weren't able to afford to work with me on a one-on-one or with their organizations, but I wanted to continue to teach. So community is a low cost, $49 per month community that you can join and get premier leadership teaching. So thank you guys so much for, I'll do one more comment, and I'll just thank you guys for logging on again today. And Josefa said, I saw an opportunity to do both early on in the pandemic, promote within and prepare for flight. I created an opportunity for myself within the organization to be promoted in order to deliver pandemic-related efforts. This same effort created a one-year obligation that would end and allow the employer to either reward the entrepreneurial spirit or lay me off. I was very curious as to whether the pandemic would give them the new insight, or if I would be able to confirm their entrenched shortcomings. You know, that is a bold move. Okay, so pretty much what Josefa said, which I totally respect. And I just met with a potential client yesterday who is doing the same thing. She has an opportunity to go on her own with a brilliant strategy. Honestly, a brilliant idea. I mean, brilliant. The market is there for it. But she's choosing to offer that idea to her organization as an entrepreneur. So the entrepreneur, your company takes the risk and you are the talent, right? But she really could go on her own with that. And that's what Josefa just did. She said she had an idea. She presented it to her company, and she has a one-year obligation, and she's going to see if after the 1 year is up, did they keep her on or did they punt the idea? So that's a great strategy. But guess what? Here's a good news, Josefa. Hopefully you protected yourself, whereby if they don't like your idea, you can take your idea to somewhere else or go on your own as a consultant. So I don't think you're going to lose in that case. So thank you guys. Thank you, Arlene, for your warm comments there. Arlene, hope to see you in our community group, right? Join us over there. Thank you guys. And I will see you next Monday. And hopefully I'll see some of you guys in the sign up sheets. All right. Take care.